The CEO had made a promise on live television that stunned half the country. "I will only marry the man my son chooses." People laughed. Commentators mocked her. Investors called it a publicity stunt. But no one laughed harder than the men who spent months trying to impress her 7-year-old son with expensive gifts, private jets, and promises they never intended to keep. And none of them noticed the quiet single dad standing at the edge of the school parking lot every afternoon. Ethan Walker never competed for attention. At 4:30 sharp, his aging blue pickup truck rolled into the elementary school pickup lane outside Cedar Ridge Elementary in suburban Ohio. The paint was faded. The passenger door squeaked. One taillight was held together with clear tape. Yet every afternoon, his daughter Lily smiled the moment she saw it. Ethan climbed out, carrying a worn lunch cooler and a folded utility bill sticking halfway from his jacket pocket. He knelt beside Lily as she ran toward him through the school hallway doors. Before asking about homework, before asking about grades, he checked the strap on her backpack where a seam had started coming loose. Then he handed her half of the sandwich he had clearly saved from his own lunch. Lily never noticed. Fathers often hid sacrifices inside ordinary moments. As they walked toward the truck, a black SUV stopped near the curb. Parents glanced over immediately. The vehicle belonged to Charlotte Kensington, founder and CEO of Kensington Technologies, one of the fastest-growing software companies in America. She stepped out in a tailored navy coat, composed and elegant despite the long workday behind her. Beside her was her son, Noah. The boy looked smaller than the photographs that appeared in magazines. Quieter too. While Charlotte answered a call from her assistant, Noah stood alone near the flagpole, watching children leave with their families. His eyes lingered on Ethan and Lily. Not because of the truck. Not because of the clothes. Because they were laughing. Real laughter. The kind that could not be purchased. Ethan opened the pickup door for his daughter, then noticed a loose shoelace on a younger student struggling with an overloaded backpack. Without hesitation, he crouched and tied it. The child's mother mouthed a silent thank you from across the parking lot. Ethan simply nodded and walked away. Charlotte saw the exchange. Only for a moment. Then her phone rang again. The evening sky turned orange over Main Street as Ethan and Lily stopped at a small diner with a flickering neon sign. It wasn't a special occasion. It was Wednesday. Wednesday meant one grilled cheese sandwich split between 2 plates and free refills on hot chocolate. The waitress already knew their order. While Lily colored on a paper placemat, Ethan quietly reviewed a stack of paperwork. Medical forms. Insurance statements. Notes from specialists. One page disappeared quickly into the folder when Lily looked up. Whatever was written there, he clearly did not want her worrying about it. The waitress noticed the documents. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Ethan smiled. "We're managing." It was the kind of answer people gave when the truth was heavier than they wanted others to carry. Later that night, after dropping a payment into the mailbox outside the post office, Ethan sat alone in his truck beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp. The engine was off. The cab was silent. He unfolded the same utility bill from earlier and stared at the numbers. Then he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry. It held a tiny silver charm bracelet with several missing pieces. His thumb rested on one empty slot longer than necessary. Something about the bracelet mattered deeply to him. Something connected to a promise he was still trying to keep. He closed the box and drove away. Across town, Charlotte Kensington sat in her enormous kitchen reviewing contracts while Noah drew quietly at the island counter. After nearly an hour of silence, the boy slid a piece of paper toward her. Charlotte looked down. It showed a blue pickup truck. A smiling girl. A man kneeling beside a child to tie a shoe. "Who's this?" she asked. Noah looked at the drawing for several seconds. Then he answered softly. "The kind of dad every kid deserves." Charlotte froze. Because for the first time since making her public promise, her son wasn't talking about a billionaire, an athlete, or a famous entrepreneur. He was talking about a stranger. And neither of them knew that Ethan Walker was carrying a burden far greater than anyone could see. A burden that would soon bring all 3 lives together in a way none of them were prepared for. The next morning arrived with a cold drizzle that painted the streets silver. Ethan Walker was already awake before sunrise. The small house was quiet except for the hum of an aging furnace and the soft whistle of a kettle in the kitchen. He packed Lily's lunch carefully, cutting her sandwich into stars because she had once mentioned that school lunches looked more fun that way. Then he slipped a handwritten note into her lunchbox. He did it every day. Sometimes it was a joke. Sometimes a reminder that her mother would be proud of her. Sometimes just 3 words. You are loved. Lily never knew he stayed up late thinking of what to write. By 7:30, the old pickup truck was rolling through town. On the passenger seat sat Lily's science project, a cardboard model of the solar system Ethan had helped repair after midnight when the original had collapsed. He never mentioned the lost sleep. Parents rarely counted those hours. After dropping her off near the school hallway entrance, Ethan headed to the maintenance company where he worked. Most people only noticed him when something broke. A leaking pipe, a failed air conditioner, a flickering light fixture. Yet before lunch, he had already solved a problem that would have shut down an entire office building for the day. He worked quietly, cleaned up after himself, and left without waiting for recognition. During his break, instead of eating, he sat in his pickup and made a phone call. His voice remained calm. Can we move the appointment to next month? A pause followed. I understand. Thank you. When the call ended, he stared at the steering wheel for several seconds before folding another medical statement into the same worn folder from the diner. The folder was growing thicker. His wallet was growing thinner. That afternoon, Charlotte Kensington found herself thinking about the drawing Noah had made. The image should have been forgettable. Instead, it stayed with her through meetings, investor calls, and contract reviews. By the time she arrived at Cedar Ridge Elementary, she noticed something she had never paid attention to before. Ethan was helping an elderly crossing guard carry supplies from her car. No cameras. No audience. No performance. Just a simple act of kindness. Noah noticed too. The boy watched Ethan lift the heavy box into the school office and return with the same quiet expression he always wore. That is him, Noah said from the back seat. Charlotte glanced toward the school entrance. The man from your drawing? Noah nodded. Something softened in her son's voice. He always helps people. Charlotte said nothing. But for the first time she found herself curious. Later that evening, Ethan stopped at a grocery store after work. He carefully compared prices, placing items back on the shelf more than once. Milk, bread, soup, a small birthday cake kit Lily had been admiring for weeks. He hesitated before putting it in the cart anyway. Near the checkout line, he noticed a young mother struggling to keep her toddler entertained while searching for enough money in her purse. Without a word, Ethan handed the cashier a few dollars and stepped away before the woman could even thank him. By the time she turned around, he was already loading groceries into his pickup truck beneath the fading evening sky. Yet as he reached home, another envelope waited inside the mailbox. He recognized the logo immediately. The hospital. For a long moment, he remained standing on the porch. The porch light cast a lonely glow across the paper in his hands. Inside, Lily was laughing at a cartoon. Inside, life still felt normal. Ethan finally opened the envelope. His eyes moved slowly across the page. The color drained from his face. Then he folded it carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and forced a smile before walking through the front door. Across town, Noah sat beside his bedroom window looking out into the rain. He had made a decision. And the next morning, he would do something that neither his mother nor Ethan Walker could possibly expect. The next morning the rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks damp and shining beneath a pale Ohio sunrise. Ethan Walker parked his pickup truck in the usual spot outside Cedar Ridge Elementary and watched Lily hurry toward the school entrance carrying her repaired solar system project. Her smile made the sleepless night worthwhile. The hospital letter was still folded inside his jacket pocket. He had not told her what it said. Not yet. Some burdens felt easier to carry alone. As Ethan turned toward his truck, he heard small footsteps behind him. Noah Kensington stood there clutching a sketchbook against his chest. For a moment neither spoke. Then the boy held out a page. Ethan looked down. It was another drawing. This one showed a little girl beside a blue pickup truck under a bright yellow sun. The details were surprisingly careful. Even the tape taillight was there. Ethan smiled gently. You are pretty talented. Noah shifted his weight. Do you think so? I know so. The answer came without hesitation. Before Noah could say anything else, a black SUV pulled into the drop-off lane. Charlotte stepped out quickly, concern crossing her face the moment she realized her son had wandered away. Noah. Her voice was calm but firm. Noah immediately moved closer to her. Charlotte glanced at Ethan. I am sorry if he bothered you. He did not bother me at all, Ethan replied. He was showing me his artwork. Charlotte looked at the sketchbook, then at Noah, then back at Ethan. Most adults in her world praise children while checking their phones. Ethan had actually looked. It was a small thing, yet somehow it felt important. Later that afternoon, Charlotte found herself arriving early for pickup. She rarely had time to do that. Through the school hallway windows, she noticed volunteers preparing decorations for an upcoming family night fundraiser. Several parents were helping. Among them was Ethan. He had already finished a full workday, but there he was repairing a broken display stand and helping carry folding tables from a storage room. No one appeared to have asked him. He simply noticed something needed doing and did it. Charlotte watched from a distance. Nearby, Noah was helping Lily tape paper stars onto a banner. The children laughed together easily. The sight stirred something unfamiliar inside her. She spent so much time building a company that sometimes she worried she was missing moments she could never get back. As evening settled over town, the fundraiser preparations moved to the church parking lot across from the school. Volunteers unloaded supplies from pickup trucks while children chased each other between rows of folding chairs. When a gust of wind knocked over several decorations, Ethan quietly stepped in, securing everything before anyone could panic. Then he noticed Noah struggling with a large box of supplies. Before Charlotte could intervene, Ethan was already beside him. Teamwork? He asked. Noah nodded immediately. Together they carried the box to the entrance. The boy's face glowed with pride. Charlotte felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. Ethan never treated Noah like the son of a billionaire CEO. He treated him like a child who wanted to help, a child who wanted to matter. As volunteers packed up for the evening, Charlotte finally approached him directly. Thank you for helping today. Ethan shrugged lightly. The kids are excited about the event. That is reason enough. Most people tried to impress her. Most people wanted something. Yet standing beneath the church parking lot lights, Ethan seemed completely uninterested in either. Charlotte watched him walk toward his pickup truck, where another unopened envelope sat on the dashboard beside that familiar medical folder. His shoulders looked heavier than they had that morning. He paused for a second before getting inside, as though gathering strength for something difficult. Charlotte could not explain why, but for the first time she found herself wondering not who Ethan Walker was, but what he was carrying alone. And while she watched the truck disappear into the night, Noah quietly made a decision of his own, one that would bring their lives closer together far sooner than anyone expected. The following week brought the annual Family Night fundraiser, and Cedar Ridge Elementary buzzed with anticipation. Children filled the school hallway carrying handmade posters, while parents hurried between classrooms balancing trays of cookies and raffle baskets. Ethan arrived straight from work in his maintenance uniform, a faint stain of grease still visible on one sleeve. He had barely enough time to stop at home before bringing Lily to the event. Yet somehow he still managed to help unload folding tables, repair a faulty extension cord, and carry supplies for 2 elderly volunteers before the evening officially began. Most people thanked him. A few barely noticed him. One parent near the refreshment table watched Ethan's worn uniform and aging pickup truck through the window and quietly remarked, "Nice guy, but it is hard to imagine someone like him keeping up with this crowd." The comment was not cruel. It was worse. It was dismissive. Charlotte happened to overhear it. Normally she would have ignored such small talk. Instead, she found herself glancing toward Ethan. To her surprise, he seemed completely unaware. Or perhaps he had simply spent years learning not to react. Meanwhile, Noah and Lily moved between activity booths together. The boy seemed happier than Charlotte had seen him in months. More relaxed. More present. Every so often his eyes searched the room until he located Ethan. Only then did he settle back into whatever game or project he was doing. Charlotte noticed that too. Later, inside the crowded cafeteria, a small misunderstanding began to spread. A volunteer coordinator was searching frantically for a missing envelope containing fundraiser donations. The room grew tense. Parents whispered. The principal looked concerned. Someone mentioned seeing Ethan near the registration table earlier. It was an innocent observation, but within minutes a few suspicious glances started drifting his way. Ethan had indeed been near the table. He had fixed a broken display stand there less than an hour earlier. Charlotte watched the scene unfold from across the room. Part of her felt frustrated by the unfairness. Another part wondered why Ethan remained so calm. Most people would have defended themselves immediately. Ethan simply continued helping stack chairs after an activity ended. No anger. No argument. No performance. 10 minutes later, the mystery solved itself. The envelope was discovered beneath a box of decorations in a storage closet. Relief swept through the room. Several people apologized. Ethan smiled politely and accepted every apology as if no offense had occurred. Charlotte found that harder to understand than anger would have been. On her way out, she passed him near the church parking lot where volunteers were cleaning up beneath bright floodlights. For the first time, she noticed how tired he looked. Not physically, deeply tired. The kind that came from carrying something heavy for a very long time. As Ethan loaded supplies into his pickup truck, a folded paper slipped from his jacket pocket and landed on the pavement. He did not notice. Charlotte picked it up instinctively. Before she could call out, her eyes caught a few words across the top. Children's Specialty Hospital. Treatment schedule. She immediately looked away, embarrassed by what she had seen. Ethan reached her a second later. You dropped this. His expression changed for the briefest moment. Not panic. Not fear. Something closer to worry. Thank you, he said quietly, taking the paper back. Neither explained anything. Neither asked questions. Yet as Charlotte drove home that night, she could not stop thinking about the hospital document, the medical folder, the unpaid bills, and the quiet determination she kept seeing in the man everyone else seemed to underestimate. Then just as she pulled into her driveway, her phone rang. The school nurse's number appeared on the screen. And the moment Charlotte answered, she knew something had happened involving Noah. Charlotte answered the call before the first ring finished. The school nurse sounded calm but concerned. Noah had experienced a severe anxiety episode during class. He was physically safe, yet he refused to leave the counseling office and would not speak to anyone. By the time Charlotte arrived at Cedar Ridge Elementary, the school hallway had grown quiet. Most students were already home. Through the small office window, she could see Noah sitting alone with his sketchbook pressed tightly against his chest. She entered carefully. Sweetheart. Noah did not respond. The counselor offered an apologetic smile. We have tried everything. Charlotte knelt beside her son, but the distance between them felt wider than the few feet separating them. Then Noah finally whispered 3 words. Where is Ethan? Charlotte blinked. Of all the answers she expected, that was not one of them. 20 minutes later, after several phone calls, Ethan arrived directly from work. He still wore his maintenance uniform. His pickup truck was visible through the front office window beneath the fading afternoon sky. Ethan entered quietly, not like a hero being summoned, but like a father responding to a child who needed comfort. He sat beside Noah without asking questions. For nearly a minute, neither spoke. Then Ethan pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It was one of the silly lunchbox notes he made for Lily. Sometimes words are easier to read than say, he offered. Noah studied it. The note simply read, Bad days do not last forever. Good people stay. Something shifted. Slowly, the boy's shoulders relaxed. Charlotte watched in stunned silence. Ethan had not fixed the situation through authority or expertise. He had reached Noah through understanding, through patience, through the language of children who carried worries too big for their age. A few days later, Charlotte found herself sitting inside the hospital waiting room she had seen mentioned on Ethan's paperwork. Not because she had followed him. Fate had simply crossed their paths. Noah had a routine pediatric appointment in the same medical complex. As she walked through the corridor, she saw Ethan near a reception desk. Lily sat beside him holding a stuffed rabbit that looked years old from use and love. Charlotte almost turned away. Then she noticed the expression on Ethan's face. The quiet strength she had always seen was still there. But so was exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind hidden from children. Before she could leave, Lily spotted her and waved. Charlotte approached. Ethan stood politely. No embarrassment. No self-pity. Eventually the truth emerged in pieces. Lily had been receiving specialized treatments for a chronic heart condition ever since losing her mother several years earlier. The hospital bills, the utility notices, the second jobs, the sacrifices, they were all connected to one promise. Ethan had devoted every spare dollar, every lost hour of sleep, every personal dream to keeping his daughter healthy and safe. What stunned Charlotte most was not the diagnosis. It was discovering that Ethan had quietly turned down a higher-paying job in another state because moving would have disrupted Lily's treatment team. He had chosen stability for his daughter over advancement for himself, chosen her future over his own opportunities. As they sat in the hospital waiting room beneath fluorescent lights, Charlotte realized something important. Everything she admired about Ethan had never been an act. The kindness, the patience, the responsibility. They were not qualities he performed. They were simply who he was. Before leaving, Noah handed Ethan a folded drawing. Ethan opened it after they were gone. It showed 4 people standing together beneath a bright sun. Ethan, Lily, Noah, Charlotte. There were no labels. No explanations. Yet the image lingered long after they left the hospital. Because for the first time, the possibility of becoming something more than strangers no longer seemed impossible. And neither Charlotte nor Ethan realized that Noah's drawing would soon place all of their hearts on a path none of them were prepared to walk away from. The drawing stayed on Ethan's kitchen table for days. Every morning, while packing Lily's lunch and writing another note for her lunchbox, his eyes drifted toward the picture Noah had drawn. For people beneath one bright sun, it should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt dangerous. Not because he disliked the idea, but because he had spent years teaching himself not to hope for things he could not promise his daughter. Outside, his pickup truck rattled to life before dawn as another week began. The pressure was growing. A new treatment cycle for Lily had been approved, but even with insurance, the remaining costs were overwhelming. Another utility bill waited beside the coffee maker. Another hospital statement sat unopened. Ethan quietly took on extra evening maintenance work at a local office complex after his regular shift. He never complained. He simply adjusted his schedule and kept moving forward. Meanwhile, Charlotte found herself noticing Ethan's influence in unexpected places. Noah was sleeping better. His teachers reported fewer anxiety episodes. He was participating more in class. The changes seemed gradual, yet undeniable. One afternoon in the school hallway, Noah proudly showed his counselor a notebook filled with encouraging notes. They were modeled after the messages Ethan left for Lily every day. Charlotte listened from nearby. The realization hit her harder than she expected. Ethan had not just helped Noah through one difficult afternoon. He had quietly given him tools to carry hope when adults were not around. A few days later, another surprise arrived. The school announced that a major heating system failure threatened to cancel several winter programs. Contractors estimated repairs would take weeks and cost thousands of dollars. Parents worried. Teachers scrambled for alternatives. Yet by the following afternoon, the system was functioning again. When the principal publicly thanked a local maintenance worker for identifying the problem and repairing it before extensive damage occurred, many parents were shocked to learn it had been Ethan. What surprised them even more was that he had refused payment from the school district. "Use the money for the children," he had told the principal. The story spread quickly through town. Charlotte heard it while picking up Noah. Once again, Ethan had solved a problem nobody else could solve. Once again, he had walked away without seeking recognition. It was becoming harder to explain, harder to dismiss. That weekend, Charlotte stopped by a small diner after a community event. Through the window, she spotted Ethan and Lily sharing a booth. Their usual Wednesday tradition had apparently expanded to Saturday breakfast. She watched unnoticed as Ethan carefully slid the larger portion of pancakes toward Lily. He thought she was distracted. She noticed immediately and quietly pushed half of it back. Neither said a word. The exchange lasted only seconds, yet it revealed years of love, sacrifice, and understanding between a father and daughter who had weathered difficult seasons together. For reasons she could not fully explain, Charlotte smiled. Then came the call that changed everything. Early Monday morning, Ethan received a message from Lily's specialist. The treatment schedule had been moved forward unexpectedly. A critical procedure would now happen much sooner than planned. The hospital waiting room that had become such a familiar part of their lives was suddenly looming closer. The financial pressure, the emotional strain, the fear he worked so hard to hide from Lily. It all intensified overnight. Later that same day, as Ethan sat alone in his pickup truck outside the medical center reviewing numbers that no longer seemed possible, a knock sounded gently on the driver's side window. He looked up. Charlotte stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, and for the first time since their paths had crossed, it seemed she was no longer approaching him out of curiosity, but because she genuinely wanted to help. For a moment, Ethan simply stared through the pickup truck window at Charlotte standing there with 2 cups of coffee. The hospital parking lot was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional ambulance pulling into the emergency entrance. He stepped out slowly. "You did not have to do that," he said. Charlotte handed him one of the cups. "Maybe I wanted to." Neither mentioned the bills spread across the passenger seat. Neither mentioned the fear both could see. They sat together on a nearby bench overlooking the medical center entrance. For the first time, the conversation moved beyond school events and children. Not because Ethan suddenly opened up, but because exhaustion had worn away some of the walls he normally carried. Charlotte eventually asked the question she had been holding for weeks. "How long have you been doing this alone?" Ethan looked toward the hospital windows. "Since Lily was 4. His voice remained steady. "Her mother passed away 6 months after the diagnosis." Charlotte lowered her eyes. She had known Ethan was a widower. She had never known how quickly tragedy had arrived after hope disappeared. What followed surprised her even more. Over the next few minutes, pieces of the story emerged. Years earlier, before Lily became sick, Ethan had owned a small but successful property maintenance company. He employed several workers. The business was growing. Then the medical bills started. The treatments. The travel. The uncertainty. Ethan sold the company to keep Lily's care uninterrupted. Later, when additional complications appeared, he sold the family home as well. Charlotte sat silently. Suddenly every mystery made sense. The old pickup truck. The second jobs. The utility bills. The tired eyes. None of it came from failure. Came from sacrifice. Ethan had not lost everything because he was irresponsible. He had given everything away to protect his daughter. A week later, that truth spread farther than either of them expected. At the school, a retired teacher recognized Ethan's name during a conversation about local businesses. By the following afternoon, several parents learned what he had done years earlier. Their perception began to shift. The man they thought was simply scraping by had once walked away from success for a reason most of them could barely imagine. Yet Ethan continued behaving exactly the same. When a heavy rainstorm flooded part of the church parking lot before a community food drive, he arrived early and spent 2 hours helping volunteers redirect traffic. When an elderly neighbor's mailbox was damaged by weather, he repaired it on his way home from work. When Lily's class needed supplies for a science project, he quietly donated materials without putting his name anywhere. Recognition changed nothing because recognition had never been the goal. Meanwhile, Noah grew closer to Ethan and Lily. The 4 of them occasionally shared breakfast at the same diner where Ethan and Lily had spent so many Wednesdays together. For the first time in years, Charlotte felt something that resembled family beginning to take shape around her son. But just as hope started growing, a new obstacle emerged. During Lily's next hospital appointment, Ethan learned that the upcoming procedure would require a lengthy recovery period. He would need to miss significant work. The numbers no longer worked. No matter how carefully he calculated them in the hospital waiting room afterward, the math remained impossible. Later that evening, Charlotte received a call from one of her senior executives. A major acquisition deal required her immediate attention in another state for several weeks. The timing could not have been worse. She looked across her kitchen where Noah was coloring another picture of 4 people beneath a bright sun. Then she looked at her packed schedule. For the first time, 2 worlds she had managed separately were about to collide. And neither Charlotte nor Ethan realized that the hardest test of trust was still waiting just ahead. The following 2 weeks tested Ethan Walker in ways he had quietly feared for years. Lily's procedure date arrived faster than expected, and every hour seemed divided between work, medical appointments, paperwork, and trying to make life feel normal for his daughter. The hospital waiting room became almost a second home. Nurses greeted him by name. Volunteers knew exactly how Lily liked her hot chocolate. Through it all, Ethan remained steady for her. He packed lunches. He left encouraging notes. He smiled when she looked at him. But when she slept, the weight he carried became harder to hide. At the same time, Charlotte was pulled into the largest acquisition negotiation of her career. Conference calls stretched late into the night. Flights were scheduled. Meetings multiplied. She hated leaving Noah behind even temporarily, but the responsibility could not be avoided. Before departing, she arranged for trusted caregivers and daily check-ins. Yet Noah's reaction was stronger than anyone expected. The boy withdrew almost immediately. One afternoon in the school hallway, a teacher found him sitting alone, staring at a drawing folded in half. It was the picture of 4 people beneath the bright sun. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Noah looked down. "Families always leave." The words traveled farther than he intended. They eventually reached Charlotte. They broke her heart. Meanwhile, Ethan faced a different crisis. His employer informed him that extended time away for Lily's recovery could jeopardize his position. No threats. No cruelty. Just practical realities. The company needed reliable staffing. Ethan understood. He thanked them for their honesty and spent the drive home staring through the windshield of his pickup truck as rain tapped softly against the glass. He had spent years sacrificing everything to protect Lily. Now the very stability he fought to provide seemed to be slipping away. Yet even then, he continued helping others. One evening, after stopping at a grocery store for medicine and soup, he noticed an elderly veteran struggling to load supplies into a car. Ethan quietly helped, then drove home without mentioning it to anyone. Character often revealed itself most clearly when life was hardest. The emotional strain eventually reached Lily. For years, Ethan had hidden his worries from her. This time he could not hide them all. One night she found several hospital statements and utility bills spread across the kitchen table. She stood silently reading enough to understand. Not everything. Just enough. "Are we going to lose the house?" she asked. Ethan immediately closed the folder. "No, sweetheart." "Are you sure?" The question hurt because she was not asking about money. She was asking whether she could trust the future. Ethan knelt beside her chair. "The only thing you need to worry about is getting better." Lily nodded, but uncertainty remained in her eyes. For the first time he felt something terrifying. Not fear of bills. Not fear of exhaustion. Fear that his daughter might begin carrying burdens he had always protected her from. Days later, Charlotte returned briefly from her business trip and found Noah unusually quiet. Instead of greeting her, he asked a single question. "If Lily gets sick again, will Ethan have to leave too?" Charlotte had no answer, because she had begun asking similar questions herself. Life was pulling all of them in different directions. Responsibilities were growing heavier. The fragile connection forming between their 2 families suddenly felt vulnerable. Then came the hardest moment of all. During a follow-up appointment, Ethan learned that Lily's recovery would take longer than expected. Additional care. Additional expenses. Additional time away from work. As he sat alone afterward in the familiar hospital waiting room, he finally allowed himself one brief moment of discouragement. Not for himself. For Lily. For the future she deserved. For the possibility that everything he had fought to build might still not be enough. Across town, Noah stared out his bedroom window holding the same drawing of 4 people beneath a bright sun. Slowly, he folded it and slipped it into his backpack. The next morning, he planned to do something that would force long-hidden truths into the open. And neither Ethan nor Charlotte had any idea that the moment of emotional justice they had all been moving toward was finally beginning to arrive. The next morning began quietly, but by noon everything changed. Noah arrived at Cedar Ridge Elementary carrying the folded drawing that had traveled with him for weeks. During a special family assembly in the school gymnasium, students were invited to share artwork about the people who made them feel safe. One by one, children stepped forward. Then Noah raised his hand. The room fell silent as he walked to the front. Charlotte had returned from her trip only hours earlier and sat near the back of the gym. Ethan was there too, having stopped by after a morning appointment at the hospital. Lily sat beside him, her stuffed rabbit resting in her lap. Noah unfolded the drawing carefully. For people stood beneath a bright sun. The same drawing he had carried through fear, uncertainty, and hope. The principal smiled. "Would you like to tell us about your picture?" Noah nodded. His voice trembled at first. Then it steadied. "This is my family." A soft murmur passed through the room. Noah pointed to each figure. "That is my mom. That is me. That is Lily." Then his finger rested on the fourth figure. "Ethan. And that is the man who taught me that good people stay." Silence followed. Not awkward silence. The kind that arrives when truth finally catches up to a room. Noah looked toward Ethan. "When I was scared, he listened. When Lily was sick, he stayed with her. When people needed help, he helped them. He never left." Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes. Across the gym, Ethan looked down, overwhelmed by a recognition he had never sought. The assembly ended, but the moment lingered. Teachers approached Ethan. Parents who had once dismissed him now shook his hand with genuine respect. Yet the most important conversation happened later that afternoon in a familiar hospital waiting room. Lily's specialist entered carrying new test results. Ethan instinctively reached for his daughter's hand. The doctor smiled. "The procedure worked better than we expected." Relief flooded the room. There would still be follow-up care, but the long-term outlook was finally hopeful. For the first time in years, Ethan heard words he had barely allowed himself to imagine. Lily's future looked bright. The burden he had carried alone for so long suddenly felt lighter. As they left the hospital, another surprise awaited. Several families from the school community had quietly organized support for Ethan and Lily. Not charity, respect. The principal explained that parents, teachers, and local business owners had come together after learning how many sacrifices Ethan had made over the years. One family offered transportation assistance during recovery. Another covered school activity fees. Several former clients of Ethan's old company had reached out with flexible work opportunities that would allow him to care for Lily while rebuilding his professional future. None of it came from pity. It came from trust earned over years of quiet integrity. A few weeks later, on a crisp Saturday morning, Ethan parked his pickup truck outside the same diner where so many ordinary moments had unfolded. The waitress greeted them by name. Lily slid into her favorite booth. Noah arrived with Charlotte a few minutes later. The children immediately began talking over each other about school projects and future plans. For a while, the adults simply listened. Charlotte looked across the table at Ethan. "You know," she said softly, "for a long time I thought strength looked like control. Building things. Managing problems. Never slowing down." Ethan smiled faintly. "And now?" Charlotte glanced toward the children. "Now I think it looks more like showing up every day for the people you love." Ethan did not answer immediately. He did not need to. Everything important had already been said through years of choices, sacrifices, and promises kept. Outside, sunlight reflected off the diner's windows. The old pickup truck sat beside Charlotte's SUV. Two very different lives. Two very different journeys. Yet somehow they had arrived at the same place. Before leaving, Noah pulled another drawing from his backpack. He handed it to Ethan and Lily. The picture looked similar to the first one, except this time the four figures stood in front of a small house. Above them, written in careful block letters, were four simple words. "We all stayed together." Ethan looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then at Lily. Then at Noah and Charlotte. In the end, the things that changed their lives were not money, status, or luck. They were dignity, responsibility, kindness, the quiet strength of a father who never stopped showing up. And in a world that often celebrated the loudest voices, it was that quiet character that finally brought healing, respect, second chances, and the family they had all been searching for.